with a business, the thing we're constantly looking for is energy integral to you making money? And we really focused on energy because when we were talking to business owners, we realized the biggest thing that they needed was energy. Looking at research and studies that say there's a $400 billion lending gap. Mm-hmm. And then you ask, okay, all of this money that needs to be loaned out or borrowed or this, what is it going towards? Mm-hmm. And it was inventory and it was energy costs. Like Nigeria is a huge market. Mm-hmm. It's a huge market. You have a huge number of people with willingness to pay, right? And when you're starting a business, that's always important to make sure that you're either helping someone make more money or save money.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Spotlight Podcast. This podcast is for curious minds and aspiring innovators. We dive deep to discuss inspiring, informative, and offbeat conversations on technology and business. I'm your host, Iwalola Shibuale, and today we have with us Chidalu Onyenso. Chidalu is the founder and CEO of Earthbond. It's an organization that uses climate data and analytics to make energy affordable for Africans. Chidalu has a BA from Princeton University and an MBA from Harvard Business School. She also has over a decade of experience and has worked in various fields such as marketing, operations, consulting, and more. She has an impressive track record and is currently focused on her work with Earthbond. Welcome, Chidalu. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Ola.
Awesome. Thank you. So, Chidalu, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself? I know I gave us, I've given that a little introduction, but I'd love to know more about you.
Yeah. So, yes, nice to meet you. Name is Chidalu. Started Earthbond coming out of business school, actually. Mm-hmm. The earlier part of my professional experience was focused on fintech and basically building products for African business owners. So whether it's cross-border payments, loans, what have you. And we really focused on energy because when we were talking to business owners, we realized the biggest thing that they needed was energy, right? Mm-hmm. To run a business sustainably, profitably, viably for the long term in Nigeria. It's impossible without running a generator, and that's just getting more and more and more expensive. Mm-hmm. I think you've gotten the rundown of our background and kind of how we got here.
Yeah, awesome. So before we get into the main conversation, we do a little icebreaker here.
Okay.
So let's call it a card game. Just think of like games night with your friends. Okay. Do you know how to shuffle a card?
A little bit.
Okay, I think I'll hand that over to you. I don't want it to end up all over the place. So you could just shuffle the card deck and then pick out a card. Oh, you're a professional.
No. You know, my cousin likes to play Uno, so we do this.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
Awesome. Yeah. So just pick out a card, and then read it out. Basically to see how you think. It's not anything too serious. You read out the scenario, explain what you would do in that scenario.
You're launching a podcast series. What catchy title and theme do you choose to captivate listeners?
Yeah. What do you think?
That's not the spotlight.
No, so for you, you're launching a podcast. Yeah.
Okay, I'm launching a podcast.
What would you like the podcast to be about?
Oh, that one is tough.
Okay.
BBC has a good podcast called Focus on Africa.
Okay.
And I've met different people doing more podcast content now. So it would be, I don't know, something, probably like a funny podcast about something, but I can't think of a name. Maybe, I don't know.
Do you listen to like comedy podcasts or?
I actually don't listen to podcasts that much.
Okay.
I'm trying to get into it now.
Okay. What topic would you talk about? Food?
Maybe food. Maybe like a lifestyle, like hilarious stories from everyday life in Lagos type of podcast where you just get people to say like the funniest thing or the wildest thing that's happened.
I see that being very funny, like with everything that goes on in Lagos.
Yeah,
right?
I know that everyone could kind of relate to, but also like, oh, you had a term we didn't expect. So maybe.
Okay, so you can pick out one more card.
One more.
Yeah, one more scenario.
All right. You find out that one of your top employees is selling your information and ideas to a competitor. What do you do? That one is tough. I probably, honestly, some mix of probably letting them go,
Okay.
or starting to feed them bad information and seeing what that did, because sometimes drama is entertaining. So
I love that. So feed them bad information.
see what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah, I love that. That's giving diabolical. Like, I love that. Awesome. Thank you so much. I think now we've got to know a little bit more about
Okay.
you. Like, you're going to test the waters. You're going to see how things will go.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. So you've told us a little bit about yourself. Could you tell us some about your career highlights? You talked about
Yeah.
how you got to where you are, but
Yeah.
what have been the highlights of your career?
Yeah, I think I've had somewhat. Sometimes I think my career has been quite boring. Other times, like, oh, that was exciting. So I was at IBM, like the big old computer company, for a long part of my career. It was the first job I got out of college, and I ended up building, essentially being like the lead product manager on a cross-border payments platform that was built on the blockchain. And it was a product that was amazing because it was trying to do so much to lower the cost of cross-border payments. But it was also because it was crypto, and I was working at IBM. I literally had, or I guess the legal department had my number on speed dial. So it was like every day, it was like, someone said this about the product. Is that true? Are we selling Bitcoin? Is this illegal? Are we getting subpoenaed by the SEC? So it was like a high energy product, but it was also very cool to be in. But it was also like very, very stressful sometimes, where I was just like, please stop calling me. But yeah, I learned a lot. It was very interesting to launch like an international, multinational product, and something that was very tech intensive, right? So everyone was thinking about crypto. This was back in 2017, 2018. And so a lot of everything we were doing was like top of the news. Things were changing every day. Laws were changing every day. Talent was growing every day. And I think that was probably one of the times when I realized, like, what does it mean to really build a product from scratch? And what does that mean for your customers? What does it mean to launch? And then I think the other role was I was a product manager at a fintech based in New York, focused on SMB lending at a company called Fundera. Fundera was doing SMB lending for businesses during the pandemic, which was quite difficult, as you could imagine, because banks were closing up shop in terms of like, they're like, we're not lending to small businesses. The government was like, maybe we'll figure it out. We're changing policy every day. So it was very interesting to join that effort of like, how do you make sure small businesses don't go out of business during this very, very hard time? But it also was my first time working with a startup for real, right? So I'd worked on a bunch of black sheep products, I call them, where it was like really, really cool at IBM, but like at the end of the day, IBM's bread and butter is mainframes, and I was never working on mainframes. So it was like interesting to then go to a very single focus, scrappy team, and seeing how they really drove impact, seeing how a decision we made on Monday would drive to revenue on Friday. And I think that was probably like the most eye-opening experience for me in terms of what kind of team do I want to work with? What kind of products do I want to build? Who do I want to build for? What kind of culture do I want to be in? And I think without that experience, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today.
So how did you discover the problem around energy in Africa?
Well, I think specifically in Nigeria, it's very obvious, right? It's not like something I think you have to look far to, but I think deciding that you are going to solve this, like you're going to use your professional hours and time and career to do this, it was a little different. But honestly, there's this thing called kind of like user-centered design, and like your favorite designers are like design thinking, da da da. For me, it was more of just I had entered into business school, almost thinking that I knew I wanted to work on a startup. My initial thought was, okay, maybe I can be head of product or work on the product team or this or that. I know that the target user is going to be a business owner, an African business owner. And it was just about looking at, okay, what products are available on one side and like who is building things in this space. And then the other piece was looking at African business owners and just literally talking to them, understanding, okay, what are the biggest challenges for your business? What keeps you up at night? What are the biggest costs? Looking at research and studies that say there's a $400 billion lending gap. And then you ask, okay, all this money that needs to be loaned out or borrowed or this, what is it going towards? And it was inventory and it was energy costs. And so like then energy just became like this, it just opened up a world of like, why is it that, you know, Nigerians are not getting the necessary amount of energy to run their businesses, to build this economy, et cetera. And of course we can look at things happening with the grid, and you can try and there's a lot to be done there, right? There definitely is. I studied politics and I learned I do not want to go into politics. I love studying it. I love looking at it, but like the belief I got out of that was the private sector can bridge a lot of gaps in a lot more of in a more efficient path, I think, a lot of times. And so I knew from kind of a private sector mindset, okay, what can we do if energy is a big issue? What is the problem with access to energy? Is it a cost play? Okay, how do we lower this cost? And that's kind of where Earthbond's differentiation comes in terms of how we look at financing, how we look at costs and operational costs, and how we look at kind of climate and carbon discounting.
So I have two things I'm really curious about. You mentioned when you looked at the data, when companies borrow money, where is that going to? So first is inventory, and second is, you know, energy. So how does that look like for the more developed world? What are they spending their loans on?
Oh yes, I mean, to be fair, inventory and working capital continues to be a big cost everywhere. So I think that was also part of it. It was like that's a big cost, but it's kind of right. A business, if you're any business, right, you have supply chain and trade finance. That's that's how Maersk is built, right? That's like half of their business model. But the energy piece is not the same in other places, right? You might have money going into expansion. You might have money going to salary payments. You might have money going into not inventory, but equipment and capital expenses, right? So you might be buying machinery with loans, and equipment financing is a big piece. But buying fuel, or buying like diesel and petrol, not a huge cost in other parts of the world, not for small businesses, right? They're paying for grid power in most places. And in other places, transitioning to solar is seen as a luxury. And to be fair, it is seen as a luxury here, but the difference is this notion of going off grid. If you look at the US, it's like that's you're being chic, you're being you're being independent. You don't want to be dependent on the But here in Nigeria, everyone's off grid. Everyone's somewhat off grid, right? And even if you're on grid, you're under gridded. And so your need to have a generator, that's what we're replacing, right? We're looking at that and saying, okay, you're spending too much money on this. Could solar be cheaper? And for businesses with high energy needs, right, the switch is cost effective, right? And so you are able to lower that monthly cost if you can.
So how did you decide, or how did your team decide where Earthbond was going to play? I imagine you looked at like the value chain, and I can't even imagine how complex that looks like. But how did you figure out, okay, this is where Earthbond should play, and this is where we're going to be?
A lot of it came from like our own expertise, right? Because there's two places, right? Even like there's a bias. I'm Nigerian American, so a lot of times I get the question like, why Nigeria? I was like, there's only two places I would have done this. But also like Nigeria is a huge market. It's a huge market. You have a huge number of people with willingness to pay, right? And when you're starting a business, that's always important to make sure that you're either helping someone make more money or save money. And in Nigeria, that's the only reason why people would pay for something. So in Nigeria, you can see people are paying for off-grid energy. So that was kind of one piece. But the other thing was our stance on like focusing on businesses was because we see business behavior as very critical to how you decide to prove low default rates, right?
Okay.
So to be clear in that statement, a lot of the challenges with providing financing is every bank, every financer, every lender is worried, like, is someone going to pay back?
Okay.
And a lot of times, whether it's not even a matter of willingness to pay, but capacity to pay.
Okay.
So I could be a well-paid household owner, I'm trustworthy and whatever, but when disaster strikes, it strikes. And at that point, if I need to, not run my generator, I'm not going to run my generator. If I can go without paying for solar, I will, right? Instead, I'll pay the hospital bill or pay my children's school fees or what have you. With a business, the thing we're constantly looking for is energy integral to you making money? Is energy just as important as inventory?
Okay.
And so in those cases, we look at these businesses and we prove that they have low default risk because we can say, all right, this is a grocery store that sells refrigerated goods, right? If these goods aren't refrigerated, they're not making money.
Yeah.
So it's very important for them to have solar. It's very important for them to spend some of their revenue on paying for that solar in order. So that gives our lenders some level of comfort because they can see that tie. And so then the only thing you have to check for is capacity to pay, not like, oh, is something going to go wrong? Because at the end of the day, they need to generate money. They need energy. And so it's kind of like this positive flywheel, positive reinforcing positivity. With a household, it's just difficult because budgets are limited. And we even see today, budgets are getting tighter and tighter. Things have to get stripped out of that budget, right? Everything except for food is technically a variable good. Or it's flexible. And so that's kind of why we focus on businesses, amongst other things, but it's really that when it drives down to it, can we say that by providing this energy, we're leaving these businesses better off? And sometimes with households, that's not the case. They need other things that energy doesn't always take precedence over.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense because if you look at, if you're on Twitter, you see people who used to have maybe 24/7 electricity in their estates. Now they're like 16 hours.
Because the bill went up.
Yeah, so it keeps cutting down. But for businesses, a hotel cannot afford not to have electricity.
Exactly.
Okay, so when you decided that that's where you're going to play, what were the first few steps you took to get into the market?
Yeah, it was a lot of testing. So even today, we're very early, so most of our customers come inbound to us. And they'll come through, they'll see an article we posted, or I'm not actually sure. Some of our customers will be referred by someone who has bought a service.
That's the best referral.
It's the best. It is. And so a lot of it comes from that. But originally, we were just testing into understanding what industries we wanted to focus on. And so a lot of that took, going out, talking side by side with these target customers or target industries, understanding what is your energy bill today? How often are you buying fuel? What size is your generator? Getting that understanding of their energy needs and really even understanding if solar would be a good fit. Our goal as a company is not to try and sell solar to people who it doesn't help them save money, right? It's always how much, one of our key metrics is how much money can we save you by switching to solar. It's not really just how many solar units can we deploy. And I think that's a big driver for us. And so we're constantly looking and revising what are the industries we want to focus on? How do we help these customers? How do we not just test the solution, but test the messaging, right? So that we're helping people understand how we're calculating this, what it means for them. Maybe they should wait for solar, right? Maybe they should move now, right? While things are stable. So it's all about the initial tests were really finding customers, surveying them, talking to them, identifying who we wanted to start with and test, and continuing on that.
So what industries have you identified, or is that revealing too much?
No. I think a lot of industries make sense, but I think something we always explain, it's kind of when you look at clothing industry, we'll say. You have retail stores, which they are plentiful, right? So everyone, whether it's your Instagram ready to wear, or like your in person, whatever.
Yeah.
But the reality is like, if the power goes out, I can still make a transaction on my phone.
Yeah.
Right. If I'm a clothing retailer, yes, maybe shopping won't be as pleasant, but I'll still walk into your store. I'll still browse through the racks.
Yeah.
If I'm a seamstress and I have electric or industrial sewing equipment, I need to run a generator,
Yeah.
right, to hit my quota or sew all the dresses I need to do that day. So when we look at those two businesses, the sewing company or the fashion house, that is more of a better target for us than the clothing retailer. And so that's kind of how we think about it. Like these energy intensive businesses are the ones that are more, that solar would help them more, right? Help them save money, help have a better business case.
Okay. So why solar? Why not like wind?
Mainly because of like the distributed nature of solar. So even at the beginning, very beginning, we weren't even necessarily thinking it had to be a renewable energy, but it was a very quick, like I think like within 2 days we're like, okay, yeah, that's me. Because originally we were looking at some of which exists today, right? You have these generator facility managers, right? And they basically give you a generator for free, and what they're charging you on is your diesel consumption. And the challenge is that the volatility of those prices means you're going to start fighting with your tenants about, oh, this price is going. But for you as a business, like, hey, I spent the money to invest in the generator, and the reality is prices are going up, and so you need to pass that back on to the customer. So we very quickly discarded that, which left renewables. Renewables are great because it's kind of like a fixed cost. And it's just a matter of how long can you stretch that out over time. Now, for the decision between solar and wind, we looked at more of what's happening in the Nigerian market. And the main thing is like, you can have distributed wind, but it's smaller scale. What you really need are wind farms. But for those to be able to power, you need good transmission and distribution. We don't have that, right? Not yet. You know, maybe in the future, hopefully in the future. There's a lot of work being done in that space. We talked to a couple of PhD students that are focusing on that, because the benefit would obviously, like, you have wind happens at night, solar doesn't. So at the end of the day, the promised land of energy in Nigeria will look like a hybrid mix of everything. Right? We're never going to fully get rid of diesel or petrol generators. We're never fully going to be off grid, but I do think you need a mix. Right now, solar is the most viable option for most small businesses, especially urban businesses, right? That you don't have that much access to free land. You don't need that many extra permits, etc. So this is kind of like the fastest, smartest, high quality way to get energy.
So I know natural gas is something that, I mean, we hear, Nigeria has the highest amount of natural gas. So was that consideration for Earthbond as well?
It was. And we even look at, you know, we talk with companies that do have natural gas generators and are doing the same. You still have some level of the same volatility issues and unpredictability that you have with diesel and petrol generators, to a lesser extent because it is sourced. But the challenge is when you're dealing with a non-renewable source, essentially, you have this level of there's domestic consumption always competing against international demand. And companies are always going to debate who they want to price for. A lot of companies make this decision, and you might make more by exporting rather than serving
the domestic needs.
And getting into that it's possible, it's difficult, and I think we question, how do we do this at scale in a fast enough way that Nigeria needs it? Nonetheless, there's been a lot of innovation around this, and a lot of innovation around how do you power even your normal petrol generator with other types of fuels. So I think there is work that could be done there, but I do think solar gives you this benefit where, like, the only thing you're worried about is CapEx. Right? So you don't have to worry about, okay, what is our supply of solar going to be? As long as there's sunlight and the earth is still spinning. Exactly. Especially now. Like, as long as that exists, we are okay.
Okay.
And I think that's the benefit here, right? What is the true unlock? And it happens when you're talking about renewables, where there is no person kind of able to close up supply, play with, the prices and really give people some liberation and predictability so you can build your business and manage your business without thinking like, oh, there's a surprise cost coming up. No. There's enough shocks in the market. Energy should not have to be an additional one.
Yeah. So I love that. So you basically said for businesses, we're going to make sure we're going to remove all the variables. We're going to make you able to like predict how much you're going to be spending and then bring some stability to your business. Awesome. So what success stories have you seen?
Yeah. So some of our greatest success stories have been like our early adopters, right? So we had a testing center that was based in Ogun State that I think they actually found us through our website. I think they were a cold entry.
Nice.
And in the first month the first 2 months, they saved over ₦1 million, right? Because they stopped using their generator. Most of our customers that come in, they've been able to stop using their generators, which is really great to see. Our goal is always to reduce their cost by at least 20%. And for him, he's like, you've completely removed the need for me to run and buy petrol when there's scarcity. I don't care. And I was like, even when there's scarcity, I care. I think things like that are very, very, very exciting for us. It helps us not just from like a marketing perspective, but for our own conviction, right? A lot of what we did, and for me, right, I was a student when I started this company. So a lot of what we were doing was on paper and we had conversations, but to see it transition from being an idea and a presentation to now actually being a value-driving operation is amazing. I think we want to see more businesses like that where now they're able to run sustainably, they're able to grow, they're able to think about all the other things they want to invest in because now they have reliable energy is what we are really excited about.
Yeah, I think even for the mental health of like a lot of business owners, you're saving them a lot of stress.
Yes.
Yeah, because power energy is one of like the biggest problems that you've identified. Okay, so what challenges have you seen? Like, your reaction. Unroll that for us.
So I am a first-time founder.
Okay.
So I'm trying to think of challenges for the businesses versus challenges for me.
Okay. You can also talk about the challenges for you. I mean, we would love to know that too.
No, I think in the same way that our business owners are challenged, like I am also challenged, right? We're younger than a lot of the businesses that we serve.
Oh, interesting.
Right? So like the businesses we serve, some of them have like 3 years in business, 4 years, whatever. I'm like, we are 2 years old. And so I think in a lot of ways, some of our things are just growing pains, right? So finding the right people for the right tasks and making sure that the things, and let me speak in more concrete terms. We basically doubled the size of our team, which was great. And now we have a lot more capacity to do the work, et cetera. But also trying to build a company based in Lagos, but that has breadth across the country is very, very, is a lot more challenging than I think I
imagine.
And the reality is like, it's not just people in Lagos that need renewable energy, right? It's all over the country, and there might even be more opportunity outside of Lagos. So I think that's probably one of our biggest challenges, but also biggest goals, right? It's how do we have national breadth, and how do we make sure we're serving, right? One of our earliest projects was in like Kano, but we're all based in south, southwest, southeast. So it's
how did you do that?
So we work with partners. We make it work. But it's about how do we build more of that team across the country while also making sure we are still integrated as a team, right? We don't want to be like a bunch of satellite offices. We want to be communicating. We want to be hands-on. So a lot of it is that. I think the other piece has been in terms of just challenges, it's making sure that we are staying on top of what the sentiment of business owners is every day, right? Things are changing. If you're in the ag space, in the agricultural space, lots of hardship right now.
Yeah.
And so it's understanding what they need versus what they needed 6 months ago, a year ago.
Okay.
That has changed. And so how do we make sure that what we're offering them meets their demand while also meeting their new budget?
Okay.
That goes for a lot of different industries. Keeping an eye on what's happening macroeconomically, modifying it to what we can do. And I think overarchingly, it's helping external and international investors realize that Nigeria has so much potential from an economic investment perspective. And seeing it not just as a CSR play to invest in this market, right? It's not just corporate social responsibility, but it is a real huge opportunity to invest and see returns if you have patience, right? And that patience is key.
It's not like 6 months and there's money rolling in.
Yeah, but I mean, it is where you will see those kind of like huge double-digit growth numbers if you have the time, right? And so I think in addition to the kind of like looking internally and domestically at those challenges, it's being able to explain that story to international investors, international observers. And for us, a lot of our carbon credit strategy is targeted towards that market and helping them understand what it means to, work on energy transition in Nigeria. So, yeah.
Yeah, so when you said the CSR, I immediately could understand, because I think when a lot of organizations or businesses or investors hear energy or like renewable energy, they're thinking, oh yeah, what can we just do to help the society, as opposed to thinking of it from the point of view of how can we help businesses make more money or save more money, right? So what I want to ask now is around the challenges for adoption. So you identify maybe certain businesses that need this. How do you approach them? What are the challenges you see getting them to adopt the product and implementing and staying true to it? What are the challenges you're seeing?
Yeah. I mean, staying true to it is not a problem if we've done our homework, right? So like, I think the reality is when we created this kind of like business model and thought about our value prop, it's like our value prop has to be the business's value prop, right? Like, we can't sell you something on a dream that it will, like, you know what I mean? It either helps you save money or it doesn't.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit of the difference between like the solar residential market, where like you'll be focusing on people that need reliability and are willing to pay for reliability. When you're looking at businesses, they need reliability. They're already paying for it, and they just want something cheaper. That's the only reason why they would switch. And so that's really where it comes in. So I think in terms of like adoption, it's really about like definitely being patient, right? It's not like it's definitely not a product that is as whether or not it's simple, but like thinking about like a POS solution where it's like, okay, like
it's not like you just drop it
and like here, take it, see if you like it, it'll pay itself up. No, it's more involved, right? I'm putting panels on your roof. I'm installing some equipment in your place. Like this is something that you need to think about, and you should think about, because also like our terms are multi-year in some cases. Some customers want to do it in 3 months, but some are like, I want the lowest monthly payment, so I'm going to do this over 4 years or something. And so we don't. It's not about like getting you on board and then dipping and seeing what happens, right? Yeah, it's like there's a whole customer success piece that's so tied to this. So we're basically in bed with that customer. That's a bad term, but like,
no, I think in Nigeria we can relate.
You know, like we need to be hand in hand with the success of it. It's not just about the acquisition of them or the initial adoption. It's like over time, is this continuing to save you money? And yeah, frankly, it has, and it should. And so for us, it's all about doing the background homework. It's all about also understanding what is that customer's initial objection to it. In many cases, people will load separate. And so we always want to understand, okay, this is what is going to power your business today. let's say in 5 months your business grows, is the system still going to serve you? Is the system going to start giving you problems? How do we make that trade-off between the cost of doing it now and getting a bigger system now, or waiting, and if can we expand on? So it's all of these discussions that we're having. But I mean, today, most customers, they'll come in, they'll do like what we have is essentially like a digital audit. So it's a micro-techno-economic analysis, which is basically a fancy way of saying, like, if you switched out whatever you have today for solar, is it more expensive?
Okay.
So that's where we start. And then we find the right size for them based off of that. We qualify them for financing. So we say, all right, we look at their number of years in business. We look at their past 12 months of revenue. We look at what industry they're in, and kind of doing that analysis of, like, is this an energy required or energy intensive industry and business? And then we go from there. Once the business kind of says yes, signs up, we get the equipment to site, install it, maintain it over the length of the contract. So I think that today a lot of what we're working on is making that adoption piece much easier to understand, which just means we're talking to customers every day. We're understanding what are the things we keep hearing about their fears about solar. What are the things we keep hearing about their fears about financing, right? Because there's a lot
financing
of
is like
right?
a whole other ballgame.
Definitely. I mean, both people, they want to pay cash and be done.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So how are you handling the financing? Do you do that internally, or are you partnering with a bank or something?
Yeah. So we have different financing partners, but our main goal is always to offer the financing in USD. Our main goal is always to offer the financing in Naira, right? The biggest challenge, I think, with financing is that obviously, like, the Naira goes through its things. So what we don't want is for someone to take, like, something that's borrowed, but it's, backed by USD, and then every 2 years it goes up and up and up. So we're constantly focusing on making sure that it's Naira-based loans. That helps us mitigate any kind of increases and all of that. And we drive for the lowest interest rates on market. And so, yeah.
Awesome. That's really been, I think you really explained the full cycle. My next question actually was going to be, so if I'm a business owner, I'm interested in, getting solar energy for my business, and my business does need power like 24/7. How do I get that? Like, what do I do? What's my next step? Do I just go on the Earthbond website?
Yes. So you can go on you can hit us up on WhatsApp. Okay, you can hit us up on WhatsApp. The number is 0903-560-6553. Or you can go to our website, earthbond.co. And then you can just click start saving, and then you fill out your information and we'll reach out to you ASAP.
So aside from savings, has there been any other, what would I call it, metric that businesses are tracking that, would make them continue to stay with Earthbond?
Yeah. We have other businesses that push to us because they had decided to stop running their generators often because like the costs didn't make sense. Right. So it was cheaper to run, let's say, 5 days on solar than to run their generator for 5 days. So we had a business that went from 3 days in operation to 5 days once they switched to solar. So you have that other metric, which we are still looking at, like, how do we measure this? Is it days in operation? Is it increased revenue? Is it increased income because of, being able to produce more because you're running on solar more consistently? So there's both a saving more and then making more because of solar, which is very exciting to see. We haven't yet quantified that because for most of the businesses that we have on board, it's been a savings play, but we definitely have businesses that are now starting to have to reel back, and they need to be producing more in order to see their way into the future.
So what kind of businesses are these?
Typically, they'll be they'll be what we call like small scale industrial. So maybe like a few person like agribusiness that's
Okay.
doing processing.
Okay. Maybe like baby food. I think there's a lot
Yes,
of baby
yes,
food
yes.
processing.
Baby food processing, spices.
Okay.
We've seen some businesses that are focused, even like smaller fashion houses that are like, we don't open up on Tuesdays and Wednesdays because
Just because of power.
just because
Wow.
of power. And so it's about for those businesses that need to just run machinery, but it never really makes sense if there's not enough inputs.
Yeah.
That's what we're focusing on.
Awesome. So what have been your proudest achievements?
Oh. I definitely
Like
think
what's that thing that's keeping you going and you're like, if at least because of this I will keep going.
Yeah. No, it's the businesses that we've helped so far. So like the businesses that we've helped so far have been like such a moment of like validation for like, okay, we can do this. Now let's scale it.
Okay.
I think also, and I don't want to say, I don't know if this is bad as a founder to say this, but like I love our team.
Okay.
So being able to grow a team, hire a team, get people on board that are very excited about this vision, that have been able to grow the vision past even what I've thought of, has been amazing. So I think like it's the customers and the team that have been like huge milestones, like in terms of getting us to where we are today. Yeah.
Imagine you have a lot of like research data. So are you seeing specific like states in Nigeria where like solar you might provide the biggest opportunities?
It's definitely, so we see a lot of demand in the north. There's also higher irradiation in the north, right? So so we talk about this often, like the same solar system here that you might put up in Lagos might generate, so like the kilowatt peak, you might get 70% of that or 80% of that on a great day. In the north, you'll get like 90%, right?
Wow.
Maybe more. So that huge difference is a lot of the reason why we look at that as a potential path. I think there are some challenges in terms of like identifying which businesses, which industries make sense to really investigate across the north, but we see huge opportunity there. Even in terms of looking at where it is difficult for the government to provide energy on grid is also like an opportunity, right? Because there are businesses everywhere, right? Everywhere there are people, there tend to be businesses trying to serve them. And so it's about finding those spaces and places as well, and making sure that this business, the community that this business supports, and so that whole those mini ecosystems that are outside of just the Southwest is kind of where we're looking.
So if I attended a conference recently that had some VCs who talked about how they're like running away. Once they hear B2C, they're like running the other way. So I want to ask, like, how has it been raising like funding for your business?
Interesting. And that's so funny because I feel like investors always ask me why we aren't just B2C.
Really?
Well, I think because the residential market is huge, right? Like Nigeria, 200 million people. It's hard to say like, oh yes, just 40 million businesses out of that. But there are some benefits, right? I think at the end of the day, you're right. VCs do like to hear like, okay, that's different, that's interesting. But I think at the same time, they're like, ooh, is it SMBs or is it like, flour mills? And we're like, we're not really flour mills, right? We're focusing mainly on small and medium businesses. But I think to a large extent, we aren't necessarily just focused on micro businesses, which is maybe where like the DFIs and they really want to see you. So it's sometimes I think fundraising is challenging in this market no matter what. I think some days I'm like, wow, we have the perfect story for this VC, and then we never get a call back.
Oh no.
Story of fundraising in 2024. But I think overall, like, you as a founder or me as a founder, I've had to have conviction that at the end of the day, I do want the right like VCs or investors on our cap table. And if we don't get them, that's okay. We built this model as such where if we do things right, which is a big if, right? But if we do things right, if we at least learn correctly and we iterate in the right manner, we should be able to bootstrap for quite some time. But we have been lucky to get some investors. But it's like, I went to a place where I have like classmates that have raised like much more and much quicker rounds with much less traction.
Yeah.
So it's always, it just always depends on what you're looking at and what you're comparing yourself to.
So you have classmates in like from Africa as well, building for Africa
that are like somewhere else,
okay,
in some other market.
Yeah. So do you think it's the market versus your solution?
I do think it's the market.
Okay.
I do think it's the market, but I also think 2 years ago, building in Africa, you could have raised
more. Yeah,
you could have raised more on crazy valuations, or maybe fair valuations. I don't know. Maybe we're getting unfair. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I think it's a combination of everything. I think when I think about our business and our idea, we are early stage. It's fine for someone to say no. It's not a crazy thing to say no. But I also think it's like, we get this. I've been in rooms where someone's been like, "Why are you here?" Right? And it's always so interesting to me because I'm like, half of these VCs say they back big ideas. They back, game-changing ideas. Just even for us, I focus on business owners because I think businesses are so key to political stability, economic development for communities and the communities that they're in. So it's like, at the end of the day, those businesses in many ways are hiring people, they're serving people, they're providing value. So to say that you don't back B2C, but you're a VC is kind of funny. It's like you're not this, it's okay, stick with whatever your thesis is, that's fine. But you should be focusing on businesses that are taking big leaps, because you as yourself should be taking a big leap by investing in this early stage. So that's my view on it.
Yeah. So the whole journey you've been through this past 2 years, right? What have been the biggest things you've learned?
Okay, yeah. I think the biggest thing I've learned, which this is going to sound very bad, but definitely cannot do it all on your own. I think my first financial model was, I was like, yeah, we don't need to be a bigger team than 4 people. We're good. We're fine. I need it's me. I need one ops person, 2 engineers. We're good. Like
a WhatsApp team.
Yeah, I was like, what? And I think about that. I was like, I was crazy. I think that was the biggest thing, because I think so much, especially coming from a product background, it's you do see a lot. You do get to interact with a lot of different people, and you're like, yeah, I could do that job. I could do this job. I could do some of that job. But you can't do it as well as an expert in that can, or I cannot do it as well as an expert can. And then just as well, it's you can't do all of it as one person, right? And you can't make all those decisions efficiently as one person. My opinion, and maybe it's my own limitation, but I think that is probably the biggest thing I've learned. I've learned so much about delegation, trusting my team, hiring people that will not only add value to the team, but that will grow with the team. So that has probably been one of the biggest things. I think the other piece has been about telling your story and being more transparent. I think before, I still cringe whenever I post on Instagram. I was like, oh, gosh. But I think I see the importance now. I realize how much people use these platforms to get just even a little bit of insight into what other people are doing, how they're going about it, connect with people, etc. And for me, especially right in the early days when I was doing everything solo, I realized how helpful it is to connect with people based off of maybe something I posted or something that I reshared or something that I liked or something that someone else posted or shared or whatever. So being able to be more transparent and just visible with your story, you'd be surprised about how many connections that really builds, true connections that builds. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think I read somewhere where sometimes who's on your founding team, it's not necessarily so much, it might not necessarily be the skills they bring to the table. Sometimes they might have an uncle who's just a VC and ready to give you money, or they
Yep,
might have
that
an
would be
uncle.
great. I
They
haven't
might
had one
have,
of those.
yeah. So it's really that. I mean, I
Yeah.
understand that
Yeah.
perspective. So I think one of my final questions would be, what's the North Star like for your team? Like, what direction are you like gunning your team towards?
Yeah. Yeah. Our North Star is focused on the helping as many business owners as we can. So
Okay.
it's basically if we can get to 1,000 businesses, right,
Okay.
that we've supported in their transition, both in Nigeria, but like broader speaking outside of Nigeria,
Yeah.
like we've made it. You know what I mean? Like
Amazing.
we've done it. We've like we'll still keep going, but you know what
Yeah.
I mean. Then we know that we've built the traction that we need. We built the engine that we can continue to replicate, and we can expand into both like the mandate and the regions that we want to support. But it is like looking at that number and thinking like, okay, what do we have to do to get there from where we are today? So yeah,
And there's a lot of work.
a lot of work.
to get
Always,
there.
it never ends. But
Yeah.
it's good. Yeah.
So I think this is a great segue to talking about the future. What's that looking like for Earthbond? Do you know where next you're going? Do you know who you're going to be partnering with? Like, what does that look like?
Oh yeah, we have some cool partnerships coming down the pipe.
Okay.
We see more and more of our target banks are wanting to partner with us, seeing what we're doing, seeing what's happening in the space, and finding opportunities there. I think just as well on our carbon credit side. So just to explain a bit more, basically our model looks at the data that we collect is basically how we also monetize our carbon credits. And those serve as a discount back to the end customer. So like on top of just providing financing, we're providing discounts on solar installations for businesses. All of that together is just how do we make solar cheaper? How do we make energy cheaper? And more, we're getting more and more traction there. So we're excited to be where we are today, but we can see in the near future, near to mid future, some bigger things happening on monetizing those carbon credits and being able to offer more discounted options to our end customers, and really hoping that unlocks the number of businesses that are able to tap into this. Especially given a lot of the challenges in the market and what is happening with your ability to pay for things.
So any final words? Where can our listeners or viewers learn more about Earthbond?
Yeah, you can learn more about Earthbond on Instagram or Twitter. Earthbond Co. is our handle. And check out our website, www.earthbond.co.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Chidalu. It's been I think I've learned so much about what you guys are doing.
Thank you so much. My time at the Spotlight has been great.
Awesome. Yay. Glad to hear that. Thank you. And that brings us to the end of another insightful episode of the Spotlight Podcast. Thank you so much, Chidalu, for coming on the show and telling us about the amazing work you're doing with Earthbond. For our listeners, I hope you found today's discussion insightful. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments. You can also let us know who you'd like us to bring on the podcast next in the comments. Please feel free to like, share, follow, subscribe wherever you're listening, and give us a 5-star rating on your podcast platforms. Until next time, this is Iwalola again, signing off.